Psalm 107:20. Everyone ready? Here we go. God gave the command, sent forth his word, and healed them. So they were saved, rescued from dying, destruction, or their pits. I like the fact that we've been rescued from destruction. We've been rescued from dying. And then he goes on to say, we've been rescued from our pits. And he did it by sending forth his word. So what we need to do is get in agreement with him about the fact that he has already delivered us from dying, destruction, and our pits. Mark 16:20. Here we go. And they went out and preached everywhere, while the Lord, Master, kept working right with them and confirming the message, proved that their preaching was true, validating the message with indisputable evidence by the attesting signs and miracles that were performed that closely accompanied it. Again, the word is the primary thing here. And the signs and the wonders accompany the word, back up the word, validate, verify the word. And then Acts 4:29-31. And now, O Lord, hear their threats and give us, your servants, great boldness in preaching your word. Stretch out your hand with healing power. May miraculous signs and wonders be done through the name of your holy servant Jesus. After this prayer, the meeting place shook, and they were all filled with the Holy Spirit, and they preached the word of God with boldness. We could probably use a little more boldness. We could probably use to be a little more determined and resolute about our convictions. And the way you get to that place is, number one, you're sure, and number two, God starts backing you up. He starts showing the world, the rest of the world, over the course of time, yeah, I'm not just speaking here. I'm not just mouthing. I'm not just going through the motions. You're doing something to back me up. You're doing something to support this so that other people who aren't in the same faith system can appreciate and identify and even agree with you. Yes, this is working. I want what you got. You're living a different life than everybody else around you, and I want what you got. All right, in the course of this, we have learned some things of note. Everything that Jesus said and did is a direct revelation of the will of God for all people for all time. So if he ever said it, if he ever did it, what does that mean to you? He's still doing it. He'll do it for you. Otherwise, he's changed. Otherwise, he's a respecter of persons. And he's neither one of those things. So if you ever saw him say it, if you ever saw him do it, that's still his will. And he'll still do it for you if you do what they did. If you say what God said, then God will do what you said. Now, we get this backwards sometimes. We want God to do what we say, even though we didn't say the same thing that he said. God, I want you to be my genie. Well, he's not your genie. This is saying you have the authority to speak what he's already said. And then when you do that, he is bound by his own integrity. He's bound by his own word to back up what you said that he already said. And then this one we learned recently. Pride makes excuses. Humility makes adjustments. Pride makes excuses. Humility makes adjustments. You can tell kind of where you're at by what you do. When you have an opportunity to be offended, when you have an opportunity to be challenged, when you have an opportunity to be upset about something, do you make excuses for that? Well, I can do this because such and such. I can do this for this reason. I can do this, whatever. Or do you adjust? It tells a lot about you, whether you're more on the pride side or whether you're more on the humility side. Okay, we talked about some stuff. Let's not spend a lot of time reviewing these. Most of you guys are familiar with what we've talked about so far. All these are available. Let's get to the last one that we did and then look at our new tally sheet. Covered a lot of stuff. Plenty more to go. All right, last week we talked about the Syrophoenician woman's daughter. How did that get initiated? It was the mother of the daughter who came to Jesus and requested and went through this whole process of making adjustments. Was faith mentioned? Yes. Was faith evidenced? Yes. Just like we just read, pride makes excuses, humility makes adjustments. And then after overcoming 4 opportunities to be offended, she grabbed some healing bread crumbs to deliver her girl. We as the children can take healing bread slices or loaves. They're available to us. We've just got to come to the same awareness that it is our right, and that whatever size morsel you get, that bread contains healing power. Our tally sheet, we've covered 10. We see various ways that they were initiated, all of them faith, except for 1. So 9 out of 10, the person on the receiving end or a representative of that person on the receiving end was responsible for starting this miracle. Only 1 time did the Holy Spirit decide to do something kind of at random. Was faith mentioned? We're catching up. 5 times yes, 5 times no. Was faith evidenced? 9 times yes. Only once was it not. Is faith an important part of you receiving your healing? Absolutely. You can sit and wait if you want to on God to just do the miraculous and do the spectacular thing with you, or you can initiate your own healing and make sure that that takes place, not necessarily in your time, but it will take place if you stay the course. If you wait on the other side of it, well, God's just going to do this for me. You might be waiting for a while. You might not ever receive it because that's totally his choice. But you do not have to be bound by that choice. In fact, I would say that we're probably supposed to initiate it on our own. And then God saves that special stuff for signs and wonders and other things that are attention getting, that are more significant in penetrating a new area, a new belief system into a group. Anyway, today, lesson 11, the man with the lunatic son. The man with the lunatic son. It's found in Matthew 17, 14 through 21, Luke 9, 37 through 43, and Mark 9, 14 through 27. I'll give you a few seconds. We're going to read all of those, so you'll have a moment again to write them down. All right, let's start in Matthew. Matthew 17, 14 through 21. Matthew 17, 14 through 21. When they returned to the crowds again, a man came and knelt in front of Jesus. Lord, do have pity on my son, he said, for he's a lunatic and is in a terrible state. He's always falling into the fire or into the water. I did bring him to your disciples, but they couldn't cure him. You really are an unbelieving and difficult people, Jesus returned. How long must I be with you? How long must I put up with you? Bring him here to me. Then Jesus reprimanded the evil spirit, and it went out of the boy, who was cured from that moment. Afterwards, the disciples approached Jesus privately and asked, why weren't we able to get rid of it? Because you have so little faith, replied Jesus. I assure you that if you have as much faith as a grain of mustard seed, you can say to this hill, up you get and move over there, and it will move. You will find nothing is impossible. However, this kind does not go out except by prayer and fasting. Okay, if you read various versions and study it out just a little bit, the condition of this boy, some say that he had epilepsy or seizures. There are a few that say demented, mentally deranged, delirious, or moonstruck. I thought moonstruck, that's kind of weird. I don't know that I'm familiar with that term, but it was in a couple of versions. But later in this text, we learn, and in the other versions, we learn it was an evil spirit behind it. So I'm not going to say that every time you're dealing with epilepsy or seizures that there's an evil spirit involved, but I'm saying it's possible. There could be a spirit involved in that situation. The disciples were not able to cure or heal the boy because they failed to cast out that spirit. So it wasn't a deal where they couldn't heal him. They really couldn't get rid of that spirit. We're going to spend a little bit of time talking about that today, but more so next week. Matthew 17, 17. Let's read some of these and get kind of a sense of what's happening here. So he comes to Jesus and says, I tried your disciples and they couldn't do it. And Jesus' response is really telling here. The CEV, Jesus said, you people are too stubborn to have any faith. How much longer must I be with you? Why do I have to put up with you? Bring the boy here. The ERV, Jesus answered, you people today have no faith. Your lives are so wrong. How long must I stay with you? How long must I continue to be patient with you? Bring the boy here. Is Jesus happy about this? He's not at all content about this whole turn of events. He's not excited about the wonderful performance of his ministry team. A couple more of these. Sure.
If he said, which, by the way, in my Bible, that verse is not in there, about
Verse 21, right?
Yes.
Right.
I'm trying to find which verse it was, but that's not in my Bible.
Right.
But that verse, if it was one that they didn't know they had to do that, then why was Jesus frustrated?
It's a good question. Like I said, I don't have time today to talk about verse 21. We're going to spend all of next week talking about verse 21. And one of the facts is it's not in all the manuscripts. But people misapply that verse. That 21 says, howbeit this kind goeth not out but by prayer and fasting. And people misapply that verse. I submit to you, and we're going to talk about it more next week. I submit to you, there's some other things going on in this story that gives insight to. And we shouldn't necessarily adapt it as the straight religious principle that so many people try to adapt it to. So if you
being as some spirits are stronger than others.
that's true. And I'm not saying that
it's false. No spirit is stronger than another.
well, some are harder to get out than others because of the way that they're rooted in. But we have authority over all of them.
The same authority over all.
Correct. Correct.
Spirits. So no spirit is stronger than the other. It's just the understanding of it.
From our perspective, no spirit is stronger than any other. Yes. From the effect of how much damage they could do to the person, how ingrained they are in the person, there are different degrees of strength. We have authority over all of them. But some demon could be just flipping you on the shoulder and just annoying you a little bit, or deeply entrenched in your life from years of abuse, from years of whatever. Those are sometimes more difficult to get out because there's more baggage associated with them. Does that make sense? Again, we'll talk about more of that next week, but I submit to you that there's some things going on in the disciples' lives at this point that make that verse more relevant than what we have realized. I just don't have time to deal with it today and then do what we're doing with the miracle today. So next week, we'll talk about verse 21 and that whole aspect of it. And it keeps getting bigger and bigger and deeper as I read through it and think about it. Okay, 17, continuing. Jesus said, what a generation, no sense of God, no focus to your lives. How many times do I have to go over these things? How much longer do I have to put up with this? Bring the boy here. Jesus replied, where is your faith? Can't you see how wayward and wrong this generation is? How much longer do I stay with you and put up with your doubts? Bring your son to me. Was Jesus happy? He was not happy at all about what had happened here. Do you hear him getting upset? Do you hear him getting frustrated, almost reprimanding these guys? Unbelief irritates the Lord. That's just the general truth. Unbelief irritates the Lord. Study it out. What are some of the things that made him mad? What are some of the things that upset him? You remember when the disciples were in the boat and the storm came up and they're all freaking out, and finally he gets up and calms the storm and speaks to the waves and the wind, and they cease. What's his first question to him? Where's your faith? Why did you doubt? And what he's really saying there is, you shouldn't have had me have to take care of that. You should have been able to take care of that on your own. What was it that was triggering this? Their unbelief, their lack of understanding. It was driving something that was frustrating to the Lord. Why was it frustrating? To him, there's no excuse for it. Why would we doubt? Has he ever lied to us?
We're human.
We're human, but he was too. During this phase of the process, he was too. Has he ever lied to us? Well, why do we think he's going to lie about whatever situation we're in? Has he ever failed us? Why do we think he's going to on this current situation? So there's really no explanation that's satisfactory for unbelief. Could you have had more faith? Should you have had more faith? There's no excuse to it in his eyes. It's all on us. We still haven't got a clue. We still haven't done what we needed to do. We still haven't figured this thing out. We still don't trust him. We still don't believe that he knows what he's talking about. We still don't believe that he's capable of doing everything they said he's doing. Unbelief frustrates the Lord, irritates the Lord, because to him there's no excuse for it. There's no reason for it to exist. It exemplifies the fact that we are human, like you said, but that's still a part of our nature that we haven't yet had regenerated, that we haven't yet gotten converted, that we haven't yet been transformed in. Okay, verse 18. The man did what? Brought him to Jesus. Jesus castigated, that's an interesting word, the demon who had taken up residence in the boy. And the demon fled the boy's body at the sound of Jesus' voice, and the boy was healed from that moment on. No more shaking, no more falling into fires. Was this demon trying to kill him? Whenever he would start these seizures, it wasn't just him rolling around on the floor. They would try to cast him into the fire, cast him into the water so that he would die. John 10:10, thief comes to steal, kill, and destroy. Does it make sense that an evil spirit was trying to steal, kill, and destroy? Absolutely. Was God at any part of this? No, not in any form or fashion. Okay, Matthew 17, 19, and 20. When the followers came to Jesus alone, they said, we tried to force the demon out of the boy, but we could not. Why were we not able to make the demon go out? Okay, what question are they asking here? Why couldn't we do it? What did we do wrong, or what did we not do that we were not able to cast it out? Jesus answered, you were not able to make the demon go out because your faith is too small. Let's stop right there. What was the answer to the question? All right, back up. What was the question? Why couldn't we cast it out? Why couldn't we deal with this situation? What was the answer to the question? Your faith was too small. Some versions say unbelief. Literally, it says puny faith. Puny faith, tiny faith. And then he goes on. You were not able to make the demon go out because your faith is too small. And then he continues talking. Believe me when I tell you, if your faith is only as big as a mustard seed, you can say to this mountain, move from here to here, here to there, and it will move. You will be able to do anything. So what does that mean? If it only takes a mustard seed to speak to the mountain and make it move, and these guys' faith was too small to get this done, what does that say? On that day, on that occasion, their faith was not even as big as the mustard seed. Right? And then, like I said, verse 21, this kind goeth not out but over prayer and fasting. We will talk about that next week. But the answer to the question is why they couldn't get it done is your faith was too small. The prayer and fasting is going to be a contributor to that, why their faith was small. But the answer to the question is your faith is too small. Does everyone see that? Okay. Let's read Luke's account. Luke 9, 37 through 43. Luke 9, 37 through 43. The next day they came down from the mountain. A large crowd met him. A man in the crowd called out, "Teacher, I beg you to look at my son, for he's my only child. A spirit seizes him, and he suddenly screams. It throws him into convulsions so hard that he foams at the mouth. It scarcely ever leaves him and is destroying him. I begged your disciples to drive it out, but they could not." You unbelieving and perverse generation. Okay, so the same situation. Luke says it this way: you unbelieving and perverse generation. So there's that faith again. Your faith is messed up. Your faith is not developed. Your faith is not where it needs to be. How long shall I stay with you and put up with you? Bring your son here. Even while the boy was coming, the demon threw him to the ground in a convulsion. But Jesus rebuked the impure spirit, healed the boy, and gave him back to his father, and they were all amazed at the greatness of God. Okay, verses 39 and 40 from a different version. He's possessed by an evil spirit that makes him scream out in torment and hardly ever leaves him alone. He throws him into convulsions. He foams at the mouth. When it finally does leave him, he's left with horrible bruises. Is this a good situation? Is what's happening to this boy a good thing? Is this a God thing in any way? The kid has seizures very often. He foams at the mouth. He rolls around. The demon tries to throw him in the water, throw him in the fire. He's left with horrible bruises after this thing does let up, and it very rarely lets up. 40, I begged your disciples to drive it out of him, but they didn't have enough power to do it. Now notice this is the guy's opinion, the father's opinion, not Jesus's comment on it. The father's opinion. I begged your disciples to drive it out of him. They didn't have enough power to do it. It is true they didn't do it. They failed. They were not successful at doing it. But did they have the power to do it? Let's see. Luke 9, we were 9 verses 30 and 40. Now go up to the top of that chapter. Luke 9, 1 and 2. Just a few verses earlier. Jesus convened a gathering of the 12. He gave them power and authority to free people from all demonic spirits and to heal them of diseases. He sent them out to preach the kingdom of God and to heal the sick.
This is what my point was. This is what I was saying. One demonic spirit isn't stronger than another demonic spirit, but it is that evidence that is seen by the natural eye that can play the trick on the faith value.
Correct.
Because if I see and I'm experiencing symptoms of being sick, yet I pray a prayer, did I really believe the prayer that I prayed, or do I believe the symptoms that I'm seeing?
Correct.
So it could be left in the evidence that I'm throwing up at the very moment, or it could be the evidence that I'm going through epileptic seizure, or somebody else is going through epileptic, that I trust in the fact that they haven't received their healing yet, more so than being able to take authority through faith on that spirit.
And like I said, from the spiritual perspective, they're not any different.
Right.
From the way that we deal with them, they're not any different.
Right. So it's getting out of the natural.
Correct.
The supernatural.
Correct. And if you look at it from that perspective, no, they're all the same. Yes, that's true. But when you're in practically dealing with them, some of them are going to seem to take more effort.
So the prayer and the fasting part of it, what is prayer and fasting?
It's denying yourself.
It's relationship with God.
Improving your ability to hear and listen. And
prayer is communication. And fasting is denying your flesh to have a
correct
intimate relationship with God.
Correct.
So in the intimate relationship with God, your faith is now built up because you have a relationship, an evident relationship, and so you're able to tap into the supernatural faith with faith that you're in the supernatural faith. And so then therefore you're not wavering, you're not double-minded because, what happens? Self-denial comes from what? The accuser. So this is why it's really hard, because it actually goes into a big study.
Right.
And what are we talking about here? Faith.
Correct.
So the faith is the key essential thing here.
Yes. My point with the fasting, and it's the thing that we're going to talk about more thoroughly next week, fasting doesn't change God. Fasting doesn't give you authority with God. Fasting just changes you.
Right.
It gets rid of things that are in the way of you and God communicating at the most effective level, at the most impactful level when you're dealing with situations like this. But we've appropriated it wrong. We've said, okay, we've got to go fast about this situation, as if the fast is going to change anything. The fast itself changes nothing. It changes you so that you can hear better, so that you can be more obedient, so that you can be more yielded, but it doesn't change the situation. Go ahead.
Just a quick question. Luke is the physician.
Correct.
Okay, so his account's different from.
A little bit, yeah.
Little bit more physician.
But as you read all three of these, they're all three slightly different from each other.
Secondly, I really like how it doesn't leave any doubt that what it says from all.
Right.
It doesn't say from some, from most, from all.
From all, correct.
And
Okay, so the dad said, okay, your disciples did not have enough power to do this. Was his statement true? They didn't do it. That is a true statement. But did they have the power to do it?
yes.
According to this verse, yes, they did. And it happened just a few verses earlier. So they messed up. The disciples were the ones that messed up in this thing. It wasn't that they didn't have enough power. They didn't know how to properly bring that power that they had to bear on the situation at hand. And that's where the prayer and the fasting and all that stuff enters in. We'll talk about that more next week. But the question is, did they actually have power to deal with this spirit? Yes, they did. Did they get it done? No, they didn't. For whatever reason, there's a gap between what they had available to them and what they actually did. And we're going to talk about that more next week. Is everyone good with where we're at right now in this story? Okay, when Jesus responded, when he said, okay, I took him to your disciples, and according to Luke's version, your disciples didn't have enough power to get it done. Did he say anything along the lines of, yeah, that's one of those nasty, hairy, ugly demons that takes anointing on my level to deal with, and you just didn't really have a chance in this thing. You were outmatched. I'm sorry to put you in that situation. I'll take care of it.
Yes,
Yes.
because he said they didn't have the power.
The Father said,
All that's tied in. So we're talking about what the Father said.
I'm talking about Jesus' answer here. Did Jesus give any indication that they didn't have the power to do it?
No, but they didn't.
They didn't do it, right.
And why?
They failed.
Why?
And that's what we're going to talk about. That's next week's lesson.
They submitted to the self-condemnation.
They bought the lie that the demon gave them. There were some other factors at play, and that's what we're going to talk about.
Because and that's why the prayer and fasting we talk about.
Correct.
Because I know we're trying to separate it, but it has to be very intertwined, because when we have a relationship with God, who are we?
Right.
We are the righteousness of God. Why? Because we are in Christ Jesus.
Correct.
So when we are in relationship with God, right, we are in that prayer and fasting. We are denying ourselves and our own thoughts about ourselves, taking up our true identity in Christ. And so when we meditate upon these things, we come in the authority that is given to us.
Correct.
But if we submit to the enemy, are we taking authority over them?
Right. Yeah.
And that's the key essential here that needs to be brought out is the reason why they didn't have the power is because they weren't walking in the power.
Correct.
They took the condemnation instead of the.
Correct.
So it's what you are possessing at that moment, whether or not you're going to be the victim.
Yes.
In that situation.
Yes. You're exactly right. I know there's a lot more to this than what we can cover today. So just give me some grace, and we'll talk about all of that next week. You're right. It is intertwined, so you can't really separate it, but I think you really can to a certain extent. Today, let's deal with the miracle itself, and then next week we'll talk about all this other stuff going on with why they didn't get it done. Okay? Everyone good at the moment? Jesus did not say you were outmatched. This is a big old hairy, nasty, ugly devil, and you didn't have the ability to do that. They didn't do it, so there was something wrong. Like what he's saying, they did something wrong. Their relationship wasn't correct. Something was messed up in the system and in the flow of things. But Jesus never said, look, you were outmatched here. He, in fact, was irritated. Would he be right in being irritated if they couldn't have done anything about it? The fact that they didn't do anything about it or weren't able to do it was more indicative of the real problem that Jesus was addressing. Your faith was weak. Why was your faith weak? That's what we're going to talk about next time. Okay, 9:41, Luke 9:41. Jesus answered, "O faithless ones, unbelieving and without trust in God, a perverse, wayward, crooked, and warped generation. Until when and how long am I to be with you and bear with you? Bring your son here to me." Again, was Jesus happy about this thing? He was not thrilled about this at all. The Passion. Jesus responded, "You're an unbelieving people with no faith. Your lives are twisted with lies that have turned you away from doing what is right. How much longer should I remain here offering you hope?" Then he said to the man, "Bring your son to me." Could they have had more faith? Jesus says they could have. Should they have had more faith? Yes. The fact that they didn't indicates a problem. And that's the problem that we're going to be talking about next week. So could they have done it? Should they have done it? They did not. So there's a gap. There's a discrepancy between what they should have been able to do and what they actually did. And that is partially resolved by prayer and fasting and all the other things that are going into this that we're going to talk about. All right, Mark's count, 9. Yeah.
You know, I just felt this in the spirit, and so self-control a lot of times will help me be able to develop in maturity and stuff. But I'm gonna go ahead and bring it out. James' account in James chapter 4, verse 7, what does it say there? It says, submit to God, relationship, right? Resist the devil, right? And he'll flee from you. So what's the promise? But the promise comes with an act of obedience.
With submission, right?
Submission, the intimacy, the relationship
Right.
with God. So
Right.
that's kind of cool about it.
Yes, that's good. Mark 9:14 through 27. When Jesus and his 3 disciples came back down, they saw a large crowd around the other disciples. The teachers of the law of Moses were arguing with them. The crowd was really surprised to see Jesus, and everyone hurried over to greet him. Jesus asked, "What are you arguing about?" Someone from the crowd answered, "Teacher, I brought my son to you. A demon keeps him from talking. Whenever the demon attacks my son, it throws him to the ground, makes him foam at the mouth and grit his teeth in pain. He becomes stiff. I asked your disciples to force out the demon, but they couldn't do it." Jesus said, "You people don't have any faith. How much longer must I be with you? Why do I have to put up with you? Bring the boy to me." They brought the boy, and as soon as the demon saw Jesus, it made the boy shake all over. He fell down, began rolling on the ground and foaming at the mouth. Now, what's happening here? The demon is heading towards Jesus, and it's manifesting. It wants to stay. It wants to remain in charge of this situation. So what's it going to try and do? It's going to try and bluff. The devil has a roaring lion seeking whom he may devour. He can't actually devour.
That's good.
Unless you give him the right to do it. So he's got to bluff and fake everybody to get you who have the authority to back off of that situation. So as this thing is occurring, as Jesus is in the process of getting closer to the boy and about ready to cast him out, this demon decides to throw a fit. Okay. So the boy is laying around on the floor, doing whatever he's doing, having this seizure. Jesus asked the boy's father, "How long has he been like this?" The man answered, "Ever since he was a child. The demon has often tried to kill him by throwing him into a fire or into water. Please have pity and help us if you can." Jesus replied, "Why do you say, 'if you can'? Anything is possible for someone who has faith." Right away, the boy's father shouted, "I do have faith. Please help me to have even more." When Jesus saw that a crowd was gathering fast, he spoke sternly to the evil spirit that had kept the boy from speaking or hearing. He said, "I order you to come out of the boy. Don't ever bother him again." The spirit screamed and made the boy shake all over. Then it went out of him. The boy looked dead, and almost everyone said he was. But Jesus took hold of his hand and helped him stand up. That's a pretty eventful church service.
I love that. And I didn't understand it, and now I understand it. Why you use Mark's after Matthew and Luke's. I love that. I see that.
Well, good.
It's a
There's
lot more descriptive
There's usually a reason.
That's a lot more descriptive account.
There's a lot more detail that we're going to focus on in this account than in the rest, at least today. Now next week that might not be true, but today, yes. All right, let's break this down a little bit. Verse 19. Jesus again answering that same thing. I brought him to your disciples, they couldn't do it. Jesus answered, you people today don't believe. How long must I stay with you? How long must I be patient with you? Bring the boy to me. Living. Jesus said to his disciples, oh, what tiny faith you have. How much longer must I be with you until you believe? How much longer must I be patient with you? Bring the boy to me. The passion. Jesus said to the crowd, why are you such faithless people? How much longer must I remain with you? Put up with your unbelief. Now bring the boy to me. So what is the primary thing that Jesus is upset about? Their lack of faith. The big problem that in Jesus' eyes in this whole situation is the lack of faith of the disciples. And the lack of faith was evidenced by the fact that they didn't get it done. And we're going to talk about the why of the lack of faith as part of next week's thing. But his big issue, Jesus' big concern or problem with this whole thing is, you guys are faithless. I've been around you now for how long, and you still don't get it. You still don't have a clue. You still don't understand. You're still not doing this right. All about faith. All about on this day, on this occasion, their faith was too small to do anything about it. Is everyone okay with that concept right now? Okay.
You see me all anxious. I want to bring it out. I'm trying to learn, submit, trust.
Chapter 9, verse 20 through 21. So the followers brought the boy to Jesus. When the evil spirit saw Jesus, it attacked the boy. The boy fell down and rolled on the ground. He was foaming at the mouth. Jesus asked the boy's father, how long has this been happening to him? His father answered, since he was very young. Now what happens? The guy brings the son to Jesus. He's about to encounter the anointing that's going to kick the demon out, the power that's going to kick the demon out. The demon manifests. So he's rolling around on the floor, foaming at the mouth. And what does Jesus do? How long has he been like this? Do you see what he's doing there? I'm not going to yield to this. I'm not going to respond to whatever nonsense is happening here. What's going on? He knows I've got the authority here. I'm in charge of the situation. I'm not even going to be distracted by that right now. How long has this been happening?
So he didn't buy into the bluff at all.
Correct. He knew the outcome of what this was going to happen. And rather than even deal with that, he's having a conversation with the dad.
He didn't even question his authority.
He knew how this was going to turn out. He knew he had been given the authority. So it doesn't really matter what's happening over there. We, and so many times when that happens, we get distracted. And all of our attention goes to, well, we got to shut this down. We got to deal with, all right, and you start screaming and you get into the flesh trying to respond to what the flesh is doing. And you're powerless there. You've got to keep your position of authority. We shouldn't just react to what the devil does. We're supposed to be in charge. We must hear from God and not just scream and shout in the flesh about that situation. Okay, verse 22.
Yeah.
Jesus continues with the conversation with the dad while the son's in the floor doing whatever. Many times it pitches him into the fire or the river to do away with him. If you can do anything, do it. Have a heart and help us. The Spirit has thrown him often into the fire and sometimes into the water, trying to destroy him. I've run out of options. I've tried everything. If there's anything you can do, please have pity on us and help us. Had the guy tried some stuff? He tried the disciples and that didn't work. Had he tried doctors? Had he tried therapies? Had he tried, I don't even know what they had available back then. Had he tried hypnosis? Had he tried, I don't know, pinching yourself? Whatever home remedy there might be for this kind of condition, had he tried some things? And the fact that he's still present means what? That none of those worked. None of those helped. The son is still unchanged. The son is still bound. The son is still in this prison, captured, controlled. He hadn't got to the stage of freedom yet. He hadn't got to the stage of life yet. But also notice that the dad is trying to dump the responsibility on Jesus.
With lack of faith.
The dad comes in some faith, But he's trying to say, okay, look, I've done everything I can do. I don't know anything else here. If you can do anything, please do something. Faith in the approach that Jesus might be able to help, but he's still not confident that anything's going to happen here. If there's any shot at all of you being able to do anything, please help us.
Well spoken.
Does that make sense? He's trying to put the pressure of this on Jesus.
Which gives Jesus the authority to do what he's.
Correct. The fact that he's asking, yes. Gives Jesus, you're exactly right. He had to approach him in faith to give Jesus legal right to, you're exactly right. But he's still trying to dump this whole thing. Look, I'm out of it. I've used every option I have. I've done everything I know to do. I'm done. If you can do anything, please do it. Jesus did not take the responsibility for this. Okay, the last question was, if you can do anything, please do it. Notice how Jesus responds. Verse 23. Jesus said to the Father, why did you say, if you can? All things are possible to the one who believes. What's he saying? Yes, I can do something. The question is not a matter of if I can do something. The limiting factor here is not what I can do. The limiting factor here is what you can believe. So Jesus doesn't take this offer either. I'm not responsible for this. This isn't my problem. What do you mean, if I can do anything? Of course I can do something. Of course this can be changed, but only to the extent that you can believe it. The question is not about my ability. The question is about your faith to receive my ability, to appropriate my ability. Jesus said to the Father, you said, if you can, all things are possible for him who believes. So what do you mean, if you can? If you can? Really? If you can? You're talking to God. Are you really saying that God can't do something about the situation? You're asking the wrong question. The question is, if you can believe, then it's possible to you, but only to the extent that you can believe it. The message, Jesus said, if there are no ifs among believers, anything can happen. For a believer, if is the badge of doubt. The moment you start adding if to your thoughts, the moment you start adding if to your prayers, you're not in faith anymore. You're trying to give God a second option. You're trying to give God an alternate. You're trying to make up for a second possibility. If. What do you mean if? All things are possible if you can believe.
Would that be similar to the account of the man who said, if it is your will to heal?
Different aspect of faith, but similar, yes.
Okay.
You have to get to the place where you know God can do it, and that guy had already got to that place.
Okay. So
But his deal was, I don't know that you're going to do it for me.
Right.
And this guy, I'm not sure where this guy is at specifically.
So,
I'm
yeah,
not sure.
That's why that guy said, if it's your will, that's why Jesus applied the forces.
Correct.
Okay.
To adjust that thinking in that particular guy's arsenal, right? You've got to believe that it's his will to do it for you today. That faith begins where the will of God is known. If you're not sure about the will of God to heal you and to heal you today, then you're not in any spot to start the faith journey yet. I'm not sure where this guy's at. I'm not sure if he's saying, okay, I tried your disciples and that didn't work, so I'm not sure if you can do any better. And Jesus says, look, it's not a matter of if I can do something. The real question here is, can you believe that I can do something? Can God do something? Yes. Yes. Every time, yes. The real question is, can you believe that he will do something for you today? Verse 24. Jesus had just said, it's not a matter of me being able to, it's a matter of what you believe. And this guy responds. Immediately, the father of the boy cried out with a desperate, piercing cry, saying, I do believe. Help me overcome my unbelief. The message says, no sooner were the words out of his mouth than the father cried, then I believe. Help me with my doubts. NLV, once the father cried out, he said with tears in his eyes, Lord, I have faith. Help my weak faith to be stronger. Now, it kind of sounds like when you first read this guy's talking out of both sides of his mouth. I do believe, help my unbelief. Which is it? Do you believe or do you not believe? And I submit to you that both can exist at the same time. How do I say that? Why do I say that? Let's look a little closer at this. Romans 10:10. You've heard me talk about it many times, but we'll read it again. Romans 10:10. For it's with your heart that you believe and are justified. It's with your mouth that you profess and are saved. Where do you believe? In your heart. Now, I'm not talking about the blood pump. I'm not saying you believe God with your blood pump. You can't believe God with your blood pump any more than you can believe God with your kidneys. What does the heart mean there? The center, the core, the inside of who you are. Your spirit person, the real you on the inside. That's where you believe God. Not your head, not your emotions, not even your words necessarily, but your words should come into agreement at some point. But you believe God with your heart. Proverbs 3, verse 5. Proverbs 3, verse 5. Trust God from the bottom of your heart. Don't try to figure everything out on your own. Trust God with all your heart. Never rely on what you think you know. Trust the Lord with all your heart and do not lean on your own understanding. So all three of these say you're supposed to trust God with your heart, and you're not supposed to trust what? Your mind, your thoughts, your understanding, your intelligence. You don't believe God with your mind. You believe God with your heart. You trust God with your heart. You do not rely on, you do not trust what your mind is telling you, but you believe God with your heart. Were you going to say something?
No,
Okay.
You're doing great.
Good,
God
thank you.
dealing with me on a whole other level outside of this.
Okay. That happens. That's one of the reasons I pray what I pray at the beginning. So that's good. Okay, the guy said, Lord, I believe. Where's that coming from? That's his heart. But then he goes on to say, Lord, help my unbelief. Where's that coming from? That's from his head. Remember, he's dealt with this for how many years? It's done this since the kid was a child. Year after year after year after year, he's seen these seizures. He's seen this kid drowning. He's seen this kid almost get burned in fires. He's seen this kid bruised.
And not to take away what's happening at that moment.
Right, right, yeah. I mean, yeah, he's laying on the floor doing it right as we speak. So in his mind, he has all these memories. He has all these failed attempts to get this boy healed. He has all this stuff in his mind that's warring against what his heart is saying. Did the boy get delivered or not? Ultimately, did the boy get delivered? Yes. And Jesus said, the only way that I can do anything is if you can believe. So the fact that the boy got delivered means what? He had faith. Could Jesus have fixed the problem if the guy didn't really have faith in his heart? He couldn't have.
He could have, but it would have been.
By power, yes, he could have done it, but he would not have done it. He doesn't normally operate that way. So he would not have healed the kid if the guy really didn't have faith in his heart, regardless of what his head was saying. Dad must have had faith to get the boy healed. My point in this, and this is a great point, faith will work in your heart with thoughts of doubt in your head. Faith will still work in your heart, even with thoughts of doubt flowing around in your head. Do you guys realize that the devil knows verses too?
Yeah.
He probably knows them better than we do. That's sad, but he probably does. You remember in James where it says, if a man wavers, then that man shouldn't think that he should receive anything from the Lord? So what does he try to do? What does the devil try to do? I'm believing God about something. What will he do? He will remind you of all the times before when this hadn't worked. He'll remind you of all the issues that you faced, all the problems that this thing has caused over the years. And while you're thinking about that, you still haven't changed what you believe. Your heart is still attuned and in line with the fact, I believe that this thing is going to be over. I believe that I'm healed. I believe that my money's coming, whatever the case may be. I believe God. I trust God. And then he introduces all these thoughts, all these memories to your mind. And then what's the next thing he tells you? You're starting to play with these thoughts. Now, you haven't changed your belief in your heart, but in your head, you're all over the place. And then, oh, wavering, you're wavering. Don't think now you're going to receive anything from the Lord. Why would he say that at that moment? Well, I guess you're right. I guess I shouldn't receive anything from the Lord. And you back off it. You let it go because you think you've already crossed the line by your head not being sold on the fact like your heart is sold on it. We're not aware of the fact that doubts can still exist in your head and have no bearing on your heart. So we will short circuit the process well before it's finished just because he's lied to us again and said, okay, you just blew it. So there's no point now. Faith will work in your heart even with doubts still present in your head. Now, what do you do with those thoughts? You take them captive. You over and over and over again. No, that's not what I believe. This is what I believe. You reaffirm what you believe. And the next time the thought comes up, what do? You do it again. And the next time the thought comes up, what do? You do it again. The whole process, are you changing what you believe? The wavering thing is about the heart. If from your heart you say, I'm healed, and then the next moment you say, well, fool with this isn't working. What'd you just do? You just scratch the whole thing. You just stop the whole process.
That is so incredibly accurate on how you said that, because I have done that countless times of that doubt. And it doesn't, and it's been for so many things, and it's now that it's recognizable as an attack from the enemy.
Right.
That you're better prepared
to deal with it, yeah.
To rebuke it. And because I have caught myself playing things out in my mind over a situation, and it's exhausting, physically exhausting. I'm tired. Why do I keep replaying this thing? And I'm like, it's an attack from the enemy.
Mm-hmm.
And I can sit there and they're like, no, you can't have this situation. You can't have this. And it's incredibly how I'm literally just gripping the steering wheel in the truck. I'm fighting, and I'm like, I can relax and know. And once you recognize it, how much relief and peace brought back into your
right.
It's I'm very thankful. I mean, there's not enough gratitude and thanks for that. You know.
It's awesome that you have already learned that. It's awesome that you've already come to that awareness.
It's been relatively recent that I've become. I'm thankful for it. Doesn't
you're still young in this deal, so
true. Yeah. I mean, I've literally just have battled with it, and I just had to say it because what you said was so just like on the head.
Good. Have you all had those experiences before, where you're believing God about something, and He introduces this thought, this memory of the past experience? Well, it can never change. As long as it stays in your head, you shouldn't just let it stay there. You should deal with it. But that does not negate your faith. That does not cancel your faith. Your faith will still work as long as you continue to negate the thoughts every time they come up. Now, eventually, hopefully, you get to the place where the thoughts don't even have that much weight on you anymore. You're able to more quickly deal with them, more easily deal with them completely and thoroughly. And once you become aware of his devices, the scripture says we're not ignorant of his devices. Once you become aware that this is one of the gates that he uses to try and trip you up, you're more apt to close that door. You're more apt to be aware of this. And flew with you. No, you're a liar. Get behind me. I still believe this. I still declare this. Bring whatever thoughts you want. I've said it before. I'll keep saying it probably. You can go out in the parking lot and you cannot prevent a bird from flying over your head. But you can dead sure prevent that bird from building a nest in your hair. Do you see the difference? The thought is the bird flying over your head. You might be able to do something about that. You might not be able to do something about that. But when you start entertaining that thought, when you start thinking that thought over and over and over again, when you start playing that thought, what are you doing? That bird is building a nest in your hair. And with some of us, he's got more work to do than others. You can prevent him from building a nest in your hair. You cannot necessarily prevent him from flying over with a thought. Even if the thoughts come, does that change your faith? It shouldn't. Could it? Yes. But more times than not, what he's trying to do with the thought is to get you to intentionally reverse what you said with your faith. The position that you held originally with your faith. He's getting you to adjust it. He's getting you to change it. He's getting you to back off of it. Because you think, well, there's no way this will work. I've been down this road before. Well, maybe you have. I dare say that you didn't finish the journey or you wouldn't be repeating the problem. So he won once. He got you to quit. He got you to back off. I've done all these treatments. I've done all this. I've done all this stuff. I've done this, and I've seen this doctor, and I've seen this specialist, and I've got this report, and I've tried these vitamins, and fill in the blank. Whatever you're doing, I'm not saying don't do those things. I am saying you need to make sure that you're certain of what you believed, and none of these past memories of failures, of mistakes, of errors, of it didn't work, none of those memories should be able to move you off of what you have believed. Faith can work in your heart, even with doubts in your head. Go ahead.
Yeah, so, just something that I have shared with some people, and I completely understand it in my mind, but then bringing it to words, sometimes I wasn't able to help the person understand where I'm coming from. But I said this phrase: I come to a place where I'm willing to be wrong so that I can be right. And somebody says, well, what do you mean by that? How can you say I'm willing to be wrong so I can be right? And it's like, well, I have to be willing to give the authority of what I think and what I understand and what I know over to something else, someone else, in order so that I can redirect my thinking so that I can be right in what it is that I'm understanding. And so that has a lot to do, and there's a long road on this.
Right.
But what had happened is what Jesus did was put the place of free will in that dad to choose his will to give the authority to Jesus to operate into his son so that his faith can be strong in trusting in God and not in his own understanding of the things that it is. And that has to do with all these other different things. Submit to God, resist the devil, and he will flee to you.
Right.
Trust in God and not in your own understanding.
Right.
And all these things are able to come about.
That's good.
These particular things.
Yeah. And what would happen then in that example? What would happen when you short circuit the process? Okay, fooey with you. I'm tired of trying to do it your way. I'm in charge again. We're going to do it my way. And that's exactly what you do whenever you stop the faith process. I'm done with that. I'm done waiting. I'm tired of waiting on you, whatever. I'm going to do it my way. If you've been around this at all, you realize it was probably your way that got you into mess in the first place. So your way is probably not going to get you out of it. I mean, that's
good.
That's uncertain. I mean, it's a circular logic. It doesn't work. It doesn't pan out. But that's what we're doing. We're reimposing our will into the situation. I don't care what you said. I don't care what you're doing. I don't care how you're working this out. I'm now in charge again. We're going to do it my way. All right, last verse of the day. The end of Mark's account. Mark 9:25-27. But when Jesus noticed a crowd of people came running together, he rebuked the unclean spirit, saying to it, "You dumb and deaf spirit, I charge you to come out of him and never go into him again." And after giving a hoarse, clamoring, fear-stricken shriek of anguish and convulsion him terribly, it came out. The boy lay pale and motionless like a corpse, so that many of them said, he is dead. Jesus took a strong grip of his hand, began lifting him up, and he stood. Okay, already the guy had brought the boy to Jesus, and the spirit inside him started convulsing, foaming at the mouth. He's rolling around on the ground. Now Jesus says, okay, spirit, you be gone. And now what happens? Loud shrieks, loud screams. He's convulsing again, and then it looks like he's dead on the floor. Is it possible that once you start the process of deliverance, it will look worse than before you started? In life in general. Have you ever cleaned a room? And the way to clean the room is you have to pull everything off the shelves first. You have to make it a mess worse than where it was before you can finish the cleaning process. Why is it unusual to us when God would do that? God's working this plan out. He's bringing you to the place of deliverance, and in your mind's eye it goes, wait a minute, this just got worse. Stop. No, I don't want to go through this anymore. You're close to your deliverance. You're close to your healing. But you stop the process again because it didn't fit the pattern that you thought. Once I give this to God, it's all going to get better. Where's that verse? It just said he would fix it. It didn't say that it would just get better immediately. Could it possibly get worse? Yes. Does that change anything? It just gives you another opportunity to turn loose of the process, to stop the process. If the boy was dead, do you think Jesus can handle that? Yes. Whatever happened to the boy, is Jesus still in charge?
Yes.
Yes. The man's faith is still in charge. Those are the governing items of this whole equation. So it doesn't really matter what happens in your situation, even though it looks worse. What are the governing parameters? Your faith and God's word. Have any of those things changed? You see? Even though it looks worse, even though it appears to be worse than it was, did anything that you were basing this on change? Well, why would you stop? Go ahead.
So I think that it's awesome here because what's happening at this moment in time is when you go to war, right? And so what's happening here is the enemy is coming with every single thing that it has at this time, right? It's this last
Stand.
act,
Right.
right? So now we have the infantry, which is the first wave of war. And then after that, you got the archers and you got the bombers, and all these other different things that come from the. And so they're putting everything they have into it because it's their last notion to be able to try to turn over the battle.
Right.
Right. And so everything's being piled into this. But what has happened? What happened before this act actually happened? What did Jesus do? Jesus gave what? The free will of that man as a choice to do what? To let Jesus have the authority.
So right.
Jesus was laser focused,
right.
filled with the Spirit of God,
right.
to do every work, right? So he was filled, so he was laser focused on the fact that he was given the authority. So even though that this demon is trying to do everything it can, so every single person around him, even trying to tempt the flesh of Christ into doubting, but what happened?
Right.
The authority was still
present
there because he walked in the authority of God.
To pick up whatever pieces that demon caused. So the statement to you is, okay, you're in a situation and all of a sudden it goes from bad to worse. What does that mean? You're close to your deliverance. Stick in there just a little while longer. He's throwing every resource he's got at this thing to get you to pull away right before you're free. Right before you're delivered, right before he's no longer even involved in the situation. So don't be surprised right at the end of your healing journey, before you get healed, you have a spell, you have a fit, you have something go wrong. What's the temptation there? Fool with all that. I've been down this road before and that doesn't work. Well, what have you just done? You just wasted all that time you spent believing.
I read an article last night, actually, and I don't remember all the details, but there was a female swimmer to swim across a channel.
English Channel, probably.
And it was foggy, she couldn't see, and she was just going and going, and everything was against her. And finally, she couldn't give any, she gave in, she couldn't do it anymore, so she got in the boat, only to find that she was only like a couple miles, or
Right.
half a mile
Right.
from the.
I've read that too, yeah.
So that's the same thing. She
Yes.
gave up, she gave in, where she could have seen, if the fog weren't there, she probably would have never done it. But she gave up, and but she turned around and did it.
And did it again, right. And finished it this time.
Yes.
Galatians 6:9 is one of my favorite verses. Be not weary in well doing, for in due season you will reap if you faint not, some versions say. Other versions of that say, if you don't give up, quit, or stop. What's the only tool that the devil has to prevent you from your victory?
Put that blog in there.
To get you to quit, give up, or stop. He can't defeat you. That song that we sing in Champion, I can't think of the words of it. Undefeated, not undefeated. Maybe it was undefeated.
Oh, that you give us.
You give us the authority. I think it might be undefeated. Anyway, part of that song is talking about Jesus being undefeated. Okay, we agree with that. But then it goes on to say, you're seated with him in heavenly places and you're undefeated. Wait a minute. I've suffered a whole lot of defeats. Not while you're sitting in that spot, you didn't. If you were ever defeated, what did that mean? You got up from that spot and you tried to do it on your own. So when you get close to the victory and then all hell breaks loose against you, what's the point of that outbreak? To get you to quit, to get you to get up out of your seat and yield the battle. Well, I just don't know what we're going to do. This thing's never going to change. Oh God, why did you bring me this far to just leave me here now? He didn't. You're making a dumb decision.